Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Mark Sauls from Upstel 3000 with Birju Pujara from Arkad Limited. And today we are on our next episode of Small Business Chronicles. And today you're going to get some insights on, some practical tips, things that you can do as a small business owner or business owner in terms of your day-to-day running of your business, things that you need to be aware of and that will help you, overcome obstacles, avoid pitfalls in the first place, and just learn from the experience. So, Birju, thank you for coming. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thanks for having me. As you kindly pointed out, I'm Birju here. I'm the CEO of Arkad Group. We specialize in strategy, generally in commercial, digital, and sales leadership. A lot of what we do is drawn from my history in running startups, being involved in SME, advising, C-suite, a lot of it in the healthcare space, but we've done other fields as well. We're not agnostic to one field. That's what we do. We provide strategic solutions to businesses.
Okay, so, where did you start? We had an interesting conversation, and I'm sure everybody else would like to hear it.
Yeah, it was very, very random. Right, some might say right place, right time. After university, a friend of mine happened to be setting up a business in what was then an unknown industry that was going to boom, called electronic cigarettes. He was company number 3 in the UK. He needed some help in sales. I was, dabbling in IT and online marketing and things like that after university. So he asked me to join. I took the role just because I was unhappy with the role I'd had, out of university, my 9 to 5, working at a big corporate. And I took the plunge and jumped in with him, and it was an absolute roller coaster. As small businesses often are. It blew up. There was no rule book. There was just 3 of us. We told clients we had a full sales team, and it was me and a Corsa driving from Penzance to Glasgow with everything in the boot of the car. I spent a good 2 or 3 years living out of hotels, and it was brilliant. But we grew that company from 0 to 22 million in 6 years. It's an absolute success by all rights. We're the leading brand owner. We were the first brand to ever sponsor a football club. And then it was eventually bought out by a big blue chip company. And after that, I worked for them for a year, realized I missed the startup energy and the vibe. Didn't want to spend all of my days signing off invoices on SAP. So left and then set up my own consultancy and worked with a number of startups from that point, initially in the retail space, but predominantly started going back towards healthcare, which was really my passion.
So you mentioned something there. I remember reading Richard Branson's book a long, long time ago, and I saw in there some things that he did, like make phone calls from public phone booths, which he used as his office, and gave people a perception that actually he was calling from an office somewhere, or use even burial crypts for office space where he worked with some of his teams. Now, the perception is key in business. Would you say that was part of it? And,
100%.
how would you recommend smaller businesses improve the way people perceive them?
It's funny because, we were in the retail space and things are done a certain way in that area. You hire a sales team, you have a field team, you have a national account team, and, you build out that way. But there is a term for what we're talking about in the technology space, and coming from that background, something I was always aware of. Not to say that was an intentional strategy at Nicosig, but we call it growth hacking. Finding ways to kind of add that growth out of the norm, and that applies to many more businesses than you would assume. One of the examples that we had in those days for the electronic cigarettes was, we wanted it to be made known that it was widely available. Sitting in a store versus online provides a lot of credibility. So we understood that actually being available in stores was important. But this wasn't a cheap piece of kit back then. In the early days, each one of these kits were like £40. And our product was very much targeted towards pharmacies. So trying to convince a pharmacy to take something called an electronic cigarette that looks like a cigarette and put it on their shelf was not an easy task. So what we actually did is we went to one city, we went to Manchester, and we went to one pharmacy in every postcode, so one in M1, M2, M3, and went to the shopkeeper and said, listen, what I want to do is I want to put this in your store. I want to put one kit and a bunch of refills on a sale and return basis for you. If it's not sold in a month, we'll take it back from you. And here's the wholesaler you can order it from. If you need any more, here's who you order it from. We had one of the national wholesalers who'd given us one branch to put a little bit in there. What we then did was a local campaign on the radio, really cheap. Radio advertising was super cheap, and I still think it is comparatively right now in terms of return on investment. It's a really good opportunity. We said, do you want to figure out about electronic cigarettes? And if you want to hear more, or find a local pharmacy, there are available pharmacies nationwide. If you want to, if you want to go find your local pharmacy, text smoke to this number. And we were only running this campaign in Manchester, but we were using the words like available nationwide, etc. And it didn't matter what postcode they text us from, M1, M2, because we had one store in that region that had the product in. So naturally, what happened is, we had like 600 text messages across the 2 weeks, and we texted them that one pharmacy. So these pharmacies were getting, 10, 15 people in a week asking about this stuff. So that sailor return stock got sold very quickly. They then put the orders into the wholesaler, and the wholesaler was thinking, hold on a second, there's been 3 orders this week. We had to make 3 orders this week. We better roll this out. So within 2 weeks, they then reordered across their other branches. So we then took that data and went to all the other wholesalers down south and said, hey, look what these guys did in 2 weeks. And, that's something that was just done a little bit outside of the box thinking, where, we gave the perception we're a nationwide brand available in all retail, when actually we've got one store in each postcode just in Manchester holding some sale return stock. And, it was little things like that. And then, there's several of those examples that we did over that course, but it was our methodology throughout that kind of hustle was something that carried through even to the last days.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. This is Mark Sauls from Opstel3000.com, and I'm here to tell you something that I know you're going to find of interest. There are 73 different ways to grow your business, and to find out what they are, all you have to do is book a 30-minute free consultation with me. That's right, free, to get 73 different ways to grow your business that you can walk away with at the end of the meeting if you choose to work with somebody else, or you can work with me and my specialist team to make it happen. Now, back to the podcast. Perception is everything, and would you say that's there's a struggle that people have around that, because there's this word or label that's been bandied around now almost everywhere, imposter syndrome and all that kind of thing, which becomes a limiting thought or a limiting idea or limiting belief, which stops you moving forward. So, in that example you gave me there's clearly a lack of imposter syndrome there. And because you were doing something that was a well-known technique to actually grow your business. And it's brought value to the people in terms of an improved health sort of regime. Yes, smoking is bad, but smoking electronic cigarettes is probably better than smoking tobacco cigarettes. Where would you say that mindset came from? Was that something you just had intrinsically, or did you learn that somewhere?
I think there's a slight difference. I think there's good and bad sides of believing perception is reality. If when you say perception is reality, when you're trying to sell something, you can't go purely on perception. There has to be some substance behind there, right? So I think that it comes with a caveat there. Yeah. So I think that's really important. Firstly, I don't think imposter syndrome existed then, because there was nothing. It wasn't as if we were in an environment that was. That was actually scary or intimidating. The difference was we just didn't really have a rule book. We didn't know how things were meant to be done. So we just kind of went off our instincts a little bit. Yeah. What was the cheapest way of advertising? How do we kind of make people believe that it's available everywhere, which provides a credibility piece? We understood what would need to be believed in order to get our products over the line and into the consumer's hands. And we played to our strengths in that respect. Imposter syndrome, funnily enough, for me came way later, and something I did suffer with, but it's actually once I left, because this was such a roaring success during this time that actually when I left and set my own consultancy, and naturally, the first couple of years were really hard as you're trying to build that network out and build that customer base up. You start thinking, well, was I just in the right place at the right time? Or was I, was it really me, or was it the product that carried me, or was it the product that made me look good? And you start to kind of have those doubts, and that's really where imposter syndrome came in. But in that scenario, the thing that fixed that was actually going out and having conversations. And I can't really emphasize how important getting yourself out there is, whether that be networking events or sales events or trade show events. Even after NicoSig, I continued to go to those same trade shows. That was, as part of my job. I continued to go to those for another 3 or 4 years, because that's how you meet people. That's
Yeah.
how you show people you're in the market. That's how you test your concepts and test your ideas. In the moment of speaking to someone, when you're talking about what you believe in, or your strategy, or your concepts, or your ideas, and people are nodding along and really engaged, well, that's the biggest cure to imposter syndrome, because you've got someone engaged and they're listening to you.
Yeah.
And with whether you like, however you want to position that, is essentially market research. If you're a new brand and you're a concept and you're out there talking to people and they're buying what you're saying, well, there's your validation, right? There's your cure for imposter syndrome. That shows that you're in the right place at the right time. So I think for me, it's a different thing to perception. Perception, sometimes you want to portray yourself to be a bigger company when you're starting out, but actually I think the way the market has gone, I mean, this was a long time ago. We were doing this in 2008, 2009. I think that whole need to have the person opposite you being this big company isn't as strong as it was back then. There's less need for that now. What people want is to buy into a concept, an idea that's well thought through, that's credible, and I think that comes from the person. I think there is more of that buying from the person now than there was back then. So yeah, I think it's an important shift in mindset. It's important to understand what people are buying when you're kind of playing that game, to ensure you position yourself correctly.
Yeah, it is a tough one, because when I was talking about perception, I was talking about the way you portray yourself, because sometimes especially from personal experience, I used to be a martial arts instructor before I put on 4 tons of weight and became so inflexible. And when I used to do my karate instruction, when people knew that I was just a single instructor teaching people, I got less customers than when I gave myself a name as Karate School and put pictures up of things, and put pictures up of some of the halls that I was renting to do these things, and put pictures up of students in a class, not necessarily my students, but just students in a class. So it looked like I had several students, and that I was training in various different places in the country. And when I did that, I got more customers coming. So, there's various different ways people might look at that. Some people look at it and think, well, you're portraying yourself as something that you're not. But other people might look at it as, sometimes you want to put across a big idea in your mind, and if you put it out there and people adopt it, then it's likely to become a reality. More like manifestation and visualization and all that kind of thing. So after your electronic cigarette venture, I mean, the principles in there were fantastic. Like things like, I can't remember what you called it now, but where you gave it to them, and if they don't sell it, then they return it to you within a certain period of time. That was like a very advanced way of thinking back then, because it's what you get these days with a lot of products. You get try it for a month or whatever the case is, but each time you take a trial on a free basis, before you can actually use the usable parts of it, you have to pay something and pay something and pay something. So I think what you did there was quite visionary for that time. And there's still many businesses these days that haven't adopted that trial methodology or sell or return principle. So when you moved on from electronic cigarettes, what did you do next?
So once the company was bought up, I worked there for a year or so. Gained some really kind of incredible experience working in a large company like that, and then decided I wanted to go back to what I really enjoyed, which was building stuff essentially. So I left and set up a consultancy, again working with similarly to now commercial digital sales leadership strategy, but it was very much in the retail space at the time, because that's where I had all my network and that's where my contacts were. So I offered that out there because I started to see a lot of the brands that we were working with, or we used to see in the same trade shows, and some of the things they were struggling with. I knew this was something I could help with, because we'd been there and done that at such a rapid speed. So yeah, that's where I went to next, and a lot of it was working with founders, working with small businesses, like 5 million or less essentially, and working with those type of guys, and either showing them how to get to the next level, how to grow, because you have to change. Your strategy has to change. You can't apply the same strategy that you did day one to 3 years down the line when you're now have a team, or you're doing millions in sales. Things have to change. And often that was where I'd get involved with the kind of slightly larger companies, or actually with the entrepreneurs, it was a lot more basic than that. It was actually just putting a process in place for them, following the process, accountability, having a check-in once a week. And you believe it or not, this is still so. I mean, it was something I didn't know until I saw it with my own eyes. But even at that level, when you're dealing with entrepreneurs who've left their day job, who are working on a company, I used to set tasks for them. As we set with Google Drive and had a task file in there, and every week in our accountability session, we would say, okay, these are things you're going to work on this week. Now, the beauty of Google Drive is you can see when it's last been edited.
Yeah.
And the amount of times you'll see it on a Thursday evening, the night before the meeting, because the work starts getting done. It was phenomenal. And I was like, actually accountability, there's your proof. Accountability helps, because would they be doing it unless they knew they had a meeting the next morning to where they had to show their work? So, a lot of the smaller stuff was actually providing some of that kind of framework, and, just helping them avoid some of the pitfalls in terms of getting it wrong, and working on their commercial strategy and ensuring that they're profitable enough. And I'd say where I started to recognize that strategy was missing a lot was in that stage, because what I noticed was that some people are so passionate about their product, and rightly so, you need to be, but they weren't necessarily taking the consumer's mindset into consideration. They weren't understanding the incentives of the wholesaler, the objectives of the buyer, or the retailer that they were selling to, or they had a product and the product was made beautifully and it looked great, but was it going to tick the box for someone who had to make 40% margin on a product? Was it going to tick the box for the consumer who would have to buy yours instead of something else? That was the thing that was often missing. It's so often that you're in the business that you don't think about this type of stuff on the outside, and it's understanding those incentives was the part that was missing. And a lot of the work I did back then was helping them establish that, build their avatar, who are they trying to sell to, and understand everything from wholesaler to retailer to consumer, making sure you tick their boxes.
Yeah. So in terms of accountability, that's something I would, I definitely recommend that, because I've been on that side of the boat as well. I've got a list of things to do, and I do my best to accomplish those every day. But I find that if I have someone to account to, for some reason, I actually accomplish everything. So it's about discovering, why is it that when I don't have to account to anyone, that I've got 2 or 3 things left undone, and I still feel like, well, I deserve a rest. I've just done 14 hours, But if I know that I've got an accountability session coming up, suddenly 16 hours or 19 hours doesn't matter, because I have to make sure that when that day comes, I've got everything done. And, what you said about updating things on the night before, it's something that when I was still a manager in my previous employments, we had so many things to do. It was such a busy day that sometimes you felt like you needed 2 heads and 4 arms. And that would happen frequently. We had a document on a shared drive, and you'd go in there and you'd see 4 other people editing it at 11 o'clock at night or something. So accountability is certainly something I would recommend. Would you say that small businesses need to take that on more, or is that just applicable to bigger people?
I think it's applicable to everyone. Even now, I have a mentor and a coach that I work with. I don't think that ever stops. It's just that the way in which you use that resource changes. Whereby initially it might be to bounce certain ideas for early stage strategies or whatever it might be at that stage. Ensuring that the work is getting done. At my level now, what's happening is I'm using those coaches or mentors to test ideas, to test concepts, to almost be challenged myself slightly, to ensure that too much self-belief can sometimes be a dangerous thing, where you can sometimes overthink a problem. Actually having someone who you can say, hey, listen, so this is what I'm thinking, this is what I want to do next, or this is the next big idea I have, what do you think? And someone who can objectively say, well, you know what, there's this or there's that, or this is the problem that you're going to have. That's really useful. And I can't emphasize enough how much I think coaching and mentoring is important, no matter where you are in your career. Because ultimately, there's always a next step. no matter where you are in your life. It could be that you've reached your peak and you're now trying to kind of level down a little bit and kind of take the foot off the pedal a little bit. Even that sometimes requires an element of coaching, because it is hard when you're pushing and you're constantly at a full 100% pelt all the time, to be able to kind of switch that off but keep the important things running without really kind of affecting that, or to ensure that you don't take your eyes off the personal goals, which is the reason you're doing all this work. That in itself, I think, is useful to have in your purview all the time, and a coach or a mentor is great for that. I think with the early stage stuff, what I commonly found is a lot of the entrepreneurs were coming from full-time jobs. They'd left work, and by the very nature of that, there's always someone you're accountable to. There's a role or something that you have to have completed, and you don't have that in when you start your own business, especially if you're in a small team or just doing it on your own. And what I often found was they would keep themselves busy, but keep themselves busy with the wrong things. So essentially, where the accountability piece came into play there was simply to say, okay, well, look, it's great that you're working on the packaging, but without understanding your pricing and what each of these kind of distribution channels require, you don't know how much you're able to spend or to retail. Without doing this competitor analysis, you don't really know where you need to be priced. So understand some of this stuff first. It was basically pulling them back a little bit and ensuring they were focusing on the right steps at the right time, and just holding the hand through the process a little bit.
Yeah. Hello, everyone, and thank you for listening and joining this podcast. My name is Mark Sauls from Opstel 3000, and I have produced a course that will change your leadership journey and take you towards success in a much more holistic way. My course gives you practical applications of the different leadership principles, and also gives you an experience of journaling your journey so that you can reflect upon it and make adjustments as you go along. There are many millions of leadership courses out there. Mine is based on the successes of very successful leaders and also the hardships that they came across. It also documents my own leadership experience, my journey from the shop floor into a senior leadership position, the mistakes I made, the learnings that I took from those mistakes, and the superpowers that I developed from them. I say superpowers because they're really simple, but they are absolutely life-changing in terms of your leadership journey. So I do encourage you to take the course, complete it, and get your certification at the end of it. Now, I'm also the author of 2 books, So Many Ways to Get What You Want and The Traits of Successful Leaders. These 2 books not only give you the tools for becoming a successful leader, but they also go into great depth in terms of influence and persuasion, which is a much overlooked tool in the leadership realm. Now, thank you for listening. Please do take the opportunity to read the books and do the course. Now let's get back to the podcast. I think many small businesses would take that on board. We can't get away from the fact that a lot of startups are solopreneurs, or maybe partners, 2 people, and they have a budget that's shared between the home, their personal things, their business, and everything else. And I take that from when I watch things like Gordon Ramsay's, when he goes into these restaurants and literally tears them apart for not having fresh produce in there every day. Why is this meat frozen? Why are you using frozen veg? And all this kind of stuff. And I think, well, these are small businesses, and it's not going to make any sense to them to buy fresh stuff every day at extortionate prices when they've got 5 people walking through the door, and then they have to throw the rest of it out tomorrow. That's never going to fly. So, there's budgetary constraints when it comes to small businesses. And, in terms of mentorship and stuff like that, I think that's a barrier, because they would love people to show them what to do and how to do it. And they'll probably take everything on board. But how much are they going to be charged for that? Where are they going to get that at, within their budget that they're already sharing between 4 or 5 different places? Do you think that's a barrier? And if it is, are there things out there that they don't know about where they could get this help?
100%. I mean, I think just to kind of use your same analogy for a moment with the restaurant, I think this comes back to one of my points about strategy, is that often there's a disparity and a misalignment in terms of what they think they're making and what they think the consumer wants. And I think, if we were using your same analogy, if you were trying to make a quick takeaway shop And no one really cares about where your beef came from, and where the quality of it. Well, they're there for a burger after a night out. Understand your market and serve them. If you're pitching yourself as a 5-star restaurant, then absolutely they care where it came from and the quality of the meat. And I think that was the thing. Sometimes you had these products that were trying to kind of sit on the shelves in a small store, but trying to sell these like high-end prices and dress their product up quality. And I think, often, to use that same example, is that when that mentoring comes in place, it's realigning the two.
Yeah.
It's ensuring that you understand those incentives a little bit, because of course everyone wants to create a great product, but you've also got to be very aware of the people you're trying to serve, the market you're trying to reach, the audience that you're trying to get, the demographic you're trying to hit, and make a product accordingly. So on that, I think it just kind of reminded when you raised that example that actually that's often one of the big issues that they face when you're doing this. With regards to like how you can gain some of this knowledge without the expense of a mentor, and it's an absolutely valid point. At the time when I was doing that, I had this program. I did it on a non-contractual, week by week, session by session cost. So it was never like, I'm going to charge you X £1,000 per month. It was more so, okay, every session in 1 hour, and that made it more affordable. And I think a lot of the onus there is on the mentors who want to serve that market. Similarly, that they need to make it more accessible, which is key. But that aside, here, there's so much that can be done outside of this mentoring. We can gain some of that similar knowledge. And I come back to my initial point that I can't emphasize the power of marketing, networking, and getting out there. If you're going to go out to a trade show and speak to, so I'll give you an example. There's a trade show that used to happen in the UK. I think it still goes on now, for convenience stores. Okay, all these convenience stores turn up to Birmingham, to the NEC, and they see all these stalls there trying to sell them something.
Yeah.
When I used to attend those shows, and we used to exhibit there, I used to do more business and gain more insight walking around and seeing the other stands who are trying to sell to the same audience than I did from people visiting my stand. Yeah. Because the people visiting my stand were customers. I was selling to them. And, that's useful as well, because you get a lot of feedback very quickly.
Yeah.
But what I got to learn by going to those shows and walking around is, what are people doing differently? How are they approaching the same client, and what's working and what's not?
Yeah.
Who's got the small stand and who's got the big stand? Who can I partner with? Because if they're selling to my customer and they've got a team of 50, well, is there a benefit of me picking back on their sales team? There's a lot of ways that you can take learnings and understand a little bit more about the market you're playing in by opening yourself up to that sector. And I mean, I loved trade shows and events like this, because you learn a lot very quickly. It's intense.
Yeah.
There's never a dull moment. I often used to miss lunch because I'm constantly walking around and speaking to people.
Yeah.
You never know where you're going to gain insight. If you see a big crowd of people outside a particular stand, it doesn't matter if it's nothing to do with your business. Go and speak to them.
Yeah.
Because very quickly you'll understand what they're doing differently and what's working. Why have they got the crowd?
Yeah.
And that's the most important learning I can say to everyone is get yourself exposure, get yourself out there, and get yourself learning from what the market is doing and who the best players are and why are they the best players. I remember when I used to go back then, Grenade, the energy bars were huge. They had such a big presence there. But we were doing this show for a number of years, and I saw them go from a small stand to this absolutely enormous stand. And it was like the free sampling and the energy, and they had music going on the stand, and it was fascinating. And it was just such a break away from the norm of the other stands there. I was like, well, look, they're doing something different. We need to kind of jazz it up a little bit, change things around a bit, because clearly this is drawing people in. And, that learning is not coming from someone who's visiting my stand, but from the other people who are exhibiting, the people who are selling to the same audience. Yeah. And that, in essence, is the same as what you're going to gain from mentoring, is learning something from someone who's been doing it for a while, what methodology is working best, and how and what to do. And you've got to keep your ears open and ears close to the ground for that.
Yeah, networking is definitely an important thing, and it's something that it's never been my thing. Even doing things like podcasts, there's going to be people out there thinking, I can't believe he's doing a podcast, because I was always that guy who sat in the corner quietly and never said anything. Even as a kid at parties and things like that, I would be hiding away in the corner, not wanting to get involved in anything at all. So people have been absolutely terrifying to me for many, many years. But, going into...
That's the big thing, right? That's the big difference, is that often people follow that train of thought and think, you know what, I'm okay being that guy. The fact that you understood it was better for your business, you did it anyway. Well, that's the mindset thing, and that's the big thing that people have to do. People often tell me, you know, oh, but you know, networking is not my thing. It's fine, bees. You can go into a room and speak to anyone. That was not always me. That came with time, right? That came with going to one trade show and then another, and then another, and then, you know, bit by bit it becomes second nature, right? So the same way that, you know, no doubt, you know, in years to come, you'll be like the podcast to listen to. You know, everything's got to start somewhere, right? Everything's got to start somewhere, and I think that's the key. That's the key. Can't be scared of the change.
I think it always starts within, and you know, my personality type is INTJ, so I'm an introvert by nature, but sometimes I'm an extrovert, and it just depends on what's happening. So, you know, for me, it's been about stepping out of comfort zones, and it's something I learned very young, that no growth takes place in a comfort zone. So as soon as you are comfortable somewhere, do something that scares you or makes you feel uncomfortable, and you might get an uncomfortable result from it. You might, you know, it's not always going to be a fantastic experience, but the more you expose yourself to it, the stronger you get and the better you get. And I think it depends on what it is that drives you out of your comfort zone. So, you know, you've obviously come out of comfort zones, listening to you know, to things you've spoken about. What would you say was the biggest comfort zone you came out of, or maybe not the biggest one, but which comfort zone did you come out of that has brought you the biggest you know, change or success in business or personal life?
Oh, good question. Good question. I think, you know, I mean, we spoke about it earlier on, the imposter syndrome. One of the big issues I had, and I have to say, this is only something I've tackled recently, but because I came from that startup space, my consultancy started there. You know, I would sometimes be in rooms with corporates or with some of the kind of project, you know, the larger potential projects, or now, especially in healthcare, various ministers of health, or larger departments when I'm at these trade shows in Dubai. And I started to feel that initially, that in the imposter syndrome. And the more and more I spoke to them, the more and more I realized actually they're listening to what I'm saying. They're taking in what I'm saying and asking me questions. And, you know, that's always key. If they're asking you questions, then there's something valuable that you're saying that has encouraged them to engage further. And I realized, actually, you know what, I'm probably playing in the wrong field here. I was always so fearful of actually charging more, thinking that my audience wouldn't be able to pay for that, or that's not the average of, you know, where I am right now. And I was always fearful of changing my pricing structure, this fear of losing the customer, you know. And actually I realized that, you know, if you're going to make the change, you're going to have to make the jump at some point. And when you make that jump, it means that sometimes you're going to have to say no to people. You know, you put your price out there, you put your quote out there, and they say, sorry, we can't afford it. Your next step isn't then to lower it, because then you are stuck in that field and you're there. If you need to change, you have to kind of allow yourself to potentially take a hit in your earnings, to have your revenue reduce, because, you know, you can't maintain both at the same time. You're going to be playing in a new field. That's a whole new set of networking, a whole new field, a whole new set of contacts, you know, a whole new structure to your business that you need to build in. And you know, I was still a bit nervous when I started doing it. And even though my mentor told me, right, this is the rate you need to charge, I was still going around 50-60% of that, thinking, oh, but this is still technically a startup, and they're not going to pay that type of fee. And I was questioning myself quite a lot. And I think the biggest struggle for me is I always felt this, as confident as I was in giving the advice in the initial meeting and talking through the meeting, my fear was always actually saying the rate I wanted, and saying the rate I knew I was worth. And I think that's, you know, especially in like service-based businesses or entrepreneurial or lower level, it's so easy sometimes to, you know, move away from your principle, or move away from your pricing, or, you know, bend over backwards slightly to accommodate the customer, where you actually in turn lower your value. And when you lower your value, you only hurt your long-term business. And I'm afraid to say it took me a long time to learn that. You know, it took the hard way, but actually was the best thing that I did, because, you know, it's that fear that stops you. But when you're playing in the right field and you say the number, you know, whatever that number might be for you, and the person opposite you doesn't flinch, like, cool, let's go. That is the most gratifying piece, because actually people are willing to pay for value. And if you can show value, they will pay for it. And If they're not willing to pay for it, well, then it's not the audience for you. There's a great saying. I think it's disputed who said it first, but I think it's by Moby Simmons. Apologies if I butcher it slightly, but it said, if you go to a corner shop and buy a bottle of water, it's 50p.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to a to a cinema, it's £1.
Yeah.
If you go to the airport, £1.50. And if you buy it on the plane, it's £2.50. Same bottle of water. The only thing that's changed is where it is. If you're not realizing your value, change the location, change the game you're playing. And that really resonated with me. Actually, if I am offering the value, then don't be afraid to reposition yourself and pivot. And that's one of the things that often I find that some of the businesses start to stagnate. And this is the kind of some of the business I'm working with now, that they're stagnating because they're still playing from the same playbook as they did when they started. And actually, the ability to pivot, the ability to change strategy, the ability to move and advance and evolve is actually something that's really difficult to do when you're in the business day to day. There's almost that fear that stops you kind of leveling up a little bit. And it's knowing the best way to do it and how, which I think, that's the struggle. That was the big fear that I had to get over, and it's paid off.
So when you were driving your car between places with electronic cigarettes in the back, having M1 and M2 codes, and having put across that perception, which I have to commend you on, because that's brilliant. What was the feeling you had inside? What was going through your mind on your way to these places?
Honestly, at the time, nothing other than getting the product on the shelf, because that in itself was such a challenge at the time. Like, we can get, and I think this is still true for anyone in business. We often get so kind of tied up with the end result of what's going to happen. Well, nothing happens unless you get step 2. You don't get to 10 without getting to 2 first. You got to build yourself up. Yeah. So at the time, it was like, okay, we had no idea if the radio we were going to get any messages full stop. We had no idea. But before we could test that, we had to get it into store. We had no idea if the stores would take it. We got in on the wholesale purely by just happened. We knew someone who gave us a chance. And it's what we did with that. So I'd always say, don't look too far ahead. It's great to have an image. It's great to have a goal. It's great to have an objective. But, any strategy requires focus at every step. And if you're looking too far ahead, you're not looking at what's in front of you. And I'd say, it's always good to keep an eye on that goal, but focus and put all your effort into that next step and get that right. Because it all falls down otherwise, right? You can't, you can't build on a weak foundation. So at the time, it was very much about, okay, this store has to take it because I've only got 4 pharmacies in this postcode and one has to take it, right? And it was, that was the challenge at the time. And once we got it in, it was different. And again, it was very different. Once you sign like the big boys up like Tesco and Boots, it's a very different story when you're going into a pharmacy. But at the time, it was very much about, okay, are they going to take it or not? And that was the trick. That was the challenge.
Yeah, that's that getting from step 1 to step 2 can sometimes be the biggest step you can take and the most difficult one to take. And then the ones after that, because you've overcome the first step, sometimes other ones are not as difficult, or you have more confidence that you'll be able to get past them because you've done you've gone up one step. So, in terms of, you spoke about customer, have a certain type of customer, like customer avatar kind of thing. And you also touched on, knowing your value in terms of the product you are producing or delivering to the customer. So, if you move, some people price their things based on, how much is it going to cost to manufacture? I need to add VAT on top of that. I need to add labor charges. I need to add some other variables and, all sorts of other things, and then come up with a price that gives me, 15 or 20% margin or something. And other people, depending on what the product is, will use a value-based pricing. Like you said, that bottle of water that's worth 50p at the corner shop will be worth a lot more when you're already airborne. And we see the same thing happening at your service stations. You fill up your car at a service station local to you, you pay a certain amount. But if you start running out of juice on the motorway and you have to go into the services, then it's going to be a lot more because you can't help but buy it. You have to. Would you say, that, there obviously is a connection between your pricing system and your customer avatar? it's sometimes difficult to make that adjustment, because you might adjust your price and say, I'm going to a value-based pricing system now, and then completely forget about the avatar, and then that has an impact. Would you, what kind of strategy would you recommend for that?
Yeah, no, but you're absolutely right. Your cost is your cost, and you can't always achieve the low price points or the low retail price you want, from day one. But the thing we used to teach back then is it even possible? So it might not be day one because you're ordering low volumes, and that's fine. You can take a hit on your margins, your own margins, for a little while, or offer a lower margin for some of the retailers to begin with, if you know that actually with volume comes discount, and then those pricing and those things are achievable. So a lot of the understanding that I used to offer in commercial strategy in that stage, in that market, was actually understand how your pricing works. What are the mechanics? What are the considerations you need to take in play? Right? What are the fixed costs? What are the variable? Will things go down? If your packet of crisps right now is 20-30% above market average, just because small quantity, but actually once you hit, say, 100 stores, you can move to a different supplier and they come down, by 40, 50, 60%, then actually it's worth pursuing, because you can still do that. So there's two sides to it. When I was talking about playing in the right market and actually ensuring you understand your avatar, one is pricing, and you're absolutely right. And I think the products where I struggle with, or I used to struggle to kind of see a long-term proposition for them, was, well, actually there's not much movement on your costs, and you're very expensive, and is it really going to work for who you're trying to sell to? And if there was no potential for cost reduction in the price or the manufacturing, then you might struggle a little bit here, unless you can find a new value or a perceived value that differentiates you from the rest. So in that situation, okay, well, your costs can't change, and there's not much wiggle room there. So how can we increase the perceived value, right? And that could obviously be positioning you somewhere else, rather than if you're, I don't know, an energy bar, you might want to be positioned in a convenience store, or you might want to go to a Holland and Barrett or a health store, and all of a sudden that perceived value is higher because you're sold in there, and that retail price is naturally higher. There's ways in which you can change. And the second part of the playing in the right field was actually selling to the right people. The amount of times I saw, see people, you were not going to go buy your new Apple iPhone from your local convenience store. Right, that's not how it works. You need to find the electronic stores and go to the right places because of how you spend. And there's a trick I used to do, actually. We used to have a range of different product displays back then. We had like the small display and the large displays. Yeah. And one of my tricks when I was on the road myself was I used to go to the convenience stores and see what alcohol they had on the shelf, and that was my trick. So if the most expensive whiskey they sold was say Jack Daniels or something like that, I was like, okay, well, they haven't got a huge audience who are going to spend big here. So there's no point trying to sell my expensive kits here, the ones that go for £40-50. There's no point going there. Sell the disposables, because they'll work better. There was a shop I went to in Coventry, and these guys are selling 21-year-old single malts and a whole stack like different wines. I'm like, okay, people are spending money in here, so you can go big here. And it's understanding your environment a little bit. That little bit of that widening the blinds a little bit, and actually understanding your environment actually helps you so much in understanding who you're going to sell to and why, and whether you're going to fit in that. Because again, it has to fit. You can have the best product in the world, but you put it in the wrong place, it's not going to sell. And so it's about the market you sell in as well as the price. So it's not to say that if you can't achieve your pricing day one, you're going to fail. You have to play in a different market. Go get yourself in the premium places, dress it up a little bit more premium, and sell it that way until you can widen the scope.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, these are my own words. A lot of it is in the packaging, because so many times we buy something, it doesn't matter what it is, and it comes in a box about that size, and then when you open the box, there's a bag inside that box that's that size, and when you actually get to the contents, there's about this much in it, and the box is so prettied up. It's nicely done. Very attractive, glossy paper. It's just eye-catching. And it's only it's probably been about maybe 15-20 years ago that I started taking notice of stuff like this. Even an iPhone, you buy an iPhone, and most of them will be that color. Might have that back, but all of them look they look the same, but they come in a different box with some different colors and maybe a few different shapes and things in there. So, I think that's another important thing. It's a little bit I don't know, maybe that's just my perception, but it might be a little bit more difficult to do it physically in terms of, things like software sold as a service, because those don't come in any boxes. But, there's the marketing aspect of it on social media,
There's
flyers and things that go around.
there's 2 points on that, right? And I'm from an Indian background, so I'll give you one that me and my friends constantly laugh at, right? And this is about the messaging and the marketing of it all. Since I was born, if we were ill, my mom would get turmeric and put it in milk, and we would drink it, right? And this is something we've done since we were little kids.
Yeah.
So it made us laugh. Now you go into Starbucks or Costa now, and they've got something called the golden latte, and it's like this expensive. Or you go to these health shops, they've got turmeric shots, and it's antiseptic, anti-inflammatory, and all this. I'm like, okay, yeah, but I buy a bag this big for about £1.50 from the Indian store. I'm like, this is like, you're paying for like a teaspoon of turmeric in the class, and I'm like, the business part of me wants to commend them and say, you know what, fair play, you did well on this one. But I mean, there are so many of these things, and I think that's a perfect example of how messaging changes everything, and how you set yourself up. The other thing, and it's like the example you mentioned there, is that when you're going to go out and sell, you need to understand what you're selling. Apple aren't selling a product to you; they're not selling a product. They're solving a problem. And this is something I've always believed. I didn't join NicoSig as a salesperson. I didn't know what, I believed in the product. Oh, this is great. So what I did was I was solving a problem. These guys, back then I used to look at the nicotine replacement therapy market. So how does a patch help you? It's all habitual. This is not going to work. This solves the problem. So let me go in and do this. And what essentially I was doing was going to a shop and having a conversation.
Yeah.
And soon enough, they will tell you what the problem is with their current situation, or whether it be margin or what drives them. And my job simply was to find the solution that fit, and that was it. I very much believe in that method of sales. And often you'll hear this. I'm not the first to say this. You don't sell the product.
Yeah.
You sell the solution of what you're trying to do. Yeah. You sell them an idea, a concept, right, of what you're trying to sell. You're not trying to sell water. You're solving the issue of thirst right now, right? And that's it. You're thirsty. This is going to quench your thirst, and that's the idea. And I think if you can get the story right, that is half the battle. Yeah. That's half the battle, right? A big part of, I used to do a lot of sales training, and objection handling is a huge part of that, because when you sell the product, you are going to get things about price and victim lines and where do I put it and risk and expenditure, and every single one of these is born of the fact that you're trying to sell them a product which is going to cost them money, and we're not focusing on the why of why we're selling it. Okay, well, I mean, the common thing I used to say, oh yeah, but I'm already selling a brand. Well, you sell five different brands of bread over there, right? Like, this often works. You will get objections that categorically in their store are contradictory. And it's often because you're trying to sell them something, and naturally the barriers come up.
Yeah.
So the first thing I always used to say to the salespeople is, I don't care if you go to a store and you don't sell anything the first time, right? It matters not. If you leave that store with the first name and I'll see you again in 4 weeks and they're okay with that, that's great. Yeah. Because what you've done is you tackled the first barrier of that, which is trust. I'm here to talk to you. I'm not here to sell you anything.
Yeah.
I'm in the business of solving a problem. I want to make you more money. It's got to be mutually beneficial. Understand the incentive, right? Understand that first, and then you go in and you can solve a problem. Because I would argue that if you oversell someone and you've got the best enthusiastic salesperson in the world who sold something to someone who may not necessarily have wanted it, or thought, you've twisted my arm, I'll take it. Yeah. They're not going to be a long-term customer. They're never going to be a long-term customer, because as soon as they leave, there's an element of resentment. Yeah. So it's I build trust first, and the rest follows. Is the way I look at it. Yeah. I think that's a big key to getting your product across the line. Absolutely. In any market, which software as a service or otherwise. I mean, freemium is a great way of doing it, but in software as a service. But that's ultimately where it comes from. It's building that trust, building that credibility, and then the sell.
Yeah, sometimes I think that's a really important point, because so many times people go into business sometimes out of necessity, or because they come from a line of people that have run a business. They've taken over dad's shop or mom's shop or something like that. And it might not be exactly what they want. They may not even get any training in certain things. and it's all about selling something rather than helping someone solve a problem. Because if you're helping to solve a problem, then you'll be able to identify whether there is a problem for you to solve or not, and it gives you a different feeling because you are actually bringing value, and you're not just, oh well, I made that sale today, and go home and celebrate that you've made a sale. Rather, you celebrate the fact that you've created an ally, if you like. You've got someone on board who you are helping to solve a genuine problem that they have, and once you've established that trust, then you'll probably have a long-term relationship with that person without the resentment that you mentioned. So thanks for that. So again, this has been really insightful, even though I've been in doing marketing and sales for a lot less than you have been doing. And I learn every day from different things. But that's a key thing for me, is to be able to help someone with bringing about a solution for them. And you've brought many other insights from your personal experiences that will help people take on board your advice and go further in their business ventures. So thank you very much for being here today. If you give us your contact details, I'll get them all on the screen at the end of this, so people can get in touch with you.
The best way to contact me.
Yep. Go ahead.
Sorry. The best way to contact me is through my website. That's www.arkad-group.com. And you've got my Calendly and contact forms all on there. Okay,
so just to be clear, I know your website is going under, or it's gone under revamp. It will be ready shortly. That web address is still going to be the same.
Yeah, it is. Arkad-group.com.
Excellent stuff. So everyone listening out there and watching this, please bear that in mind. There'll be a new website on Birju's organization. So, the website link will still apply. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment. Let us know what we're doing well, what we can do better to bring better value to you. So thanks all for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. This is Mark Sauls from Opstel 3000 and Birju Pujara from Arkad Limited out, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you.
Thank you.